Welcome to Mishna study Masechet Terumot, Perek Gimel Mishnah Bet. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to continue the conversation of last Mishnah. So if you remember last Mishnah, we spoke about when a person had a Safek Teruma, right? He had a watermelon, right? That he went ahead and separated and it ended up being rotten. He's not sure if it rotted before he separated it, and then that watermelon wouldn't count as Teruma. And he would have to separate a second one, and that second one would be the absolute Teruma. Or maybe it really only rotted after he separated the first one as Teruma, and the second one that he separated Safek ends up being nothing, and the first one is the real Teruma. So it's questionable which one of the two Terumot that he separated is the actual Teruma. Now we're going to speak about over here in this Mishnah is if one of these watermelons fall into Hullin, fall into regular mundane fruits, it fall back into another crate of watermelons. Now, how do we treat this? Right? Is it batel? Is it batel? Is it not? So that's going to be the discussion. Just as an introduction, we need to know that in general, if someone has something that's 100% teruma, so if you have an apple that's teruma, and that apple falls into a pile of apples, how do we treat this? Right? When it comes to meat and milk, we have this concept of batel b'shishim. Right? Less than 60, once the 1/60th of milk fell into meat, you can go ahead and eat the whole thing. It's batel. When it comes to teruma, the ratio is 1 to 100. So if you have one apple and that one apple fell into 100 other apples, so now you have a total of 101 apples. It's a 1 to 100 ratio of teruma to Hullin. Then we say that this is, we're not going to use the term batel like we use by meat and milk. We'll use the term ole. Ole means that you need to take one out, right? You literally take one out. You give that to the kohen, and the rest you could keep for yourself, right? We don't consider it teruma. It's not even a safek. Don't worry about it. You're good. Okay, that's if you have one that fell into 100. Let's say you have one that fell into less than 100, one that fell into 99, one that fell into 50, right? How do you treat that? So over here, if it's one that fell into 99, right, you're going to say that we're going to treat this whole thing, we're going to call it meduma. Meduma is from the language of dema. Dema is teruma, right? Dema is teruma. We're treating this like safek teruma. Now this whole batch, right, of the 99 plus 1 apples, right, a total of 100 apples, becomes safek teruma. Now, what's the law when it comes to Safek Teruma? As opposed to when you had the 101, that we said it's okay, it's ole. Just give one to the kohen and you can eat the rest. Over here, we're saying this whole thing is Safek Teruma, and you have to give the whole thing to a kohen. Now, parenthetically, you are allowed to sell it, right? Except for that one. So you take one of them you give to the kohen, the rest of the 99 you could sell to the kohen. So 99 apples, you sell them for $20 and you get that in return, but you're not allowed to eat it, right? We still treat it like Safek Teruma. That's when it comes to, right, well, this is an introduction. When real teruma is something that's badai, 100% teruma falls into this batch of, other items, right, of Hullin. Now, our Mishnah is talking about when this one that fell in is not 100% teruma. It's a safek. How do we treat these watermelons that we discussed in last Mishnah? We're not even sure from the outset if this watermelon is the teruma or if the other one is. Each one is a safek. Now, if one of these fall into another batch of 100 watermelons, you have a safek teruma that fell into another, a mixture. Now it's overridden. There's two safekot over here. One is the first one teruma, and the second one is we're treating this whole batch. How do we treat this whole thing now that it's a mixture of safek teruma and regular Hullin? So that's going to be a discussion of our Mishnah. Now, if one of these watermelons fell into the Hullin, it does not make it meduma. It doesn't make it a safek teruma mixture, right? Because the first one that fell in was a safek in itself. That's why. Let's say that second watermelon, which is also a safek teruma, also fell into a different place, though, right? It does not make it meduma either. Let's say you have both these watermelons that fell into the same place, right? So each one, right? Both of them fell together into another 99 watermelons, right? Less than 100. They fell into no one spot. Right? It makes the total, the whole thing, miduma, right? But now how do you treat it? You treat it like you treat the miduma, you treat it like the smaller of the two, right? So let's say you had one watermelon that was that weighed a se'ah, or say a pound. Another second watermelon that you separated weighed 2 se'ah, or 2 pounds. Now you have a 1 pound watermelon and a 2 pound watermelon, right? Each one of these are a safek, and they fell into another batch, a crate of 99 pounds. Okay, so now how do you treat this, right? That's what we're discussing in our Mishnah. So we're going to say, do you treat it like 2 pounds fell into 99? Right? Or better yet, 2 pounds, right? And they fell into, right? These 2 pounds fell into, another 100 pounds, or do you say that the one fell into another 100? Now, there's going to be a different outcome the way you look at it. If you're saying it was the 2 that fell in, right, and you're going to treat it as, you're going to have it as we call it meduma. Now, if it's 1 that fell in, if it's 1 that fell in, that's a much smaller amount. It's 1 that fell into 100. If it's 1 that fell into 100, then we're going to say that it's oleh. It's oleh be'ahadu me'ah. So it depends on which one you treat as the teruma. So if they both fell in, we're going to treat it midameot, but like the ketana, like the smaller one, right? The one that weighed less, and that's how we're going to treat the mixture. So it's the kula, right? And that's how Mishnah speaks about the safek teruma that fell into Hullin.